around the room very quickly and introduce each other and take attendance. For the record, Dennis Michelin, I'm the country manager for Georgia and Bulgaria. Dr. Prior, if you'd like to introduce yourself, and we'll continue down the list. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Dr. Prior here. I think you've all heard and seen from me enough recently, but do you want to go through the rest of it, Dennis, or are you going to we're just going to go straight on?
Yes, please continue, Dr. Prior. Seems like we know who's on the line.
Okay. So the purpose of this was twofold. We were going to introduce the concepts that we previously discussed about BNSR Sustainment, particularly with a view to sharing that with the EC members. And we'll have to find another mechanism to do that as far as Kazakhstan is concerned, but we'll go through the more detailed set has been previously put up on the APAN BNSR site, and as Dennis said, we'll be recording this session so that there will be an opportunity to review this. Dennis, do you want to talk about the translation as far as this is? Most people are English.
Right. I understand that, well, since Asem is a good English speaker, from what I remember, the point for translating was to do so for our Kazakh colleagues who didn't join. I believe pretty much everyone else on the line, I'm looking at the list right now, are fairly proficient English speakers. Let me switch into Russian and confirm that as well. Уважаемые коллеги, доброе утро всем. Я, с сожалением, отмечаю, что наши коллеги из Казахстана в настоящий момент не позвонили. В этой связи я знаю, что наши казахские коллеги не очень хорошо владеют английским языком, поэтому я был готов переводить сегодня на русский язык для них. Я предполагаю, что все остальные участники этой конференции говорят на английском языке в достаточной степени, чтобы не производить перевод вторичный и, соответственно, увеличивать эту конференцию. Есть ли кто-то на линии в настоящий момент, кто предпочел бы русский перевод, или мы все сможем разговаривать по-английски?
Денис, здравствуйте, это Геннай. У нас из Азербайджана Нигар Ханом и Назиф сейчас подключилась, а Назиф Ханом сейчас подключается. Давайте подождем их ответа. Мне кажется, будет нужен перевод на русский для них.
Добрый день, Денис. Я подключилась, просто я не хотела перебивать вас. Good day for all. It is Nigar from Agriculture, Ministry of Agriculture of Azerbaijan.
Good morning, Nigar. Pleasure to hear you. Sorry we missed each other in Tbilisi a couple of days ago. Glad you could join us. All right. What are we doing here? We're waiting for this, Nazifa to join. Is that what I'm hearing?
Гюнай Хану, может, они забыли?
Нигар, ну у вас очень хороший английский язык, я предполагаю, что для вас переводить мне не придется. Nigar, I know Nigar speaks good English. I've witnessed that number of times. So Nigar is good from our perspective. Nigar, correct? Okay. Well, as far as I know, Nazifa was a quality translator for the BMJ. Oh, here is Nazifa.
Добрый день, я очень рада вас видеть.
Yes, thank you. Я вас тоже очень рад видеть. Назифа, мы начали уже конференцию, она записывается. Я задал первый вопрос о необходимости перевода. Я думаю, что у нас, к сожалению, отсутствуют коллеги из Казахстана, из Министерства здравоохранения. Поэтому для интереса соблюдения, так сказать, временных характеристик этой встречи, я предполагаю, что мы проведем ее на английском языке. Если будут какие-то сложности, то вы или что-то будет непонятно, то вы сразу сообщайте мне, я с удовольствием буду вам переводить, дополнять что-то.
Хорошо, спасибо большое.
Okay, very well. So we've decided with the Azerbaijani colleagues that they will be participating in English. Both representatives from MOH and MOA are fluent English speakers at this moment. So unless we have Kazakh side joining outside of ASEM who also speaks English, we are clear to proceed in English alone. So Dr. Prior, over to you.
Okay, thank you all. Welcome again, everybody. As I said, this is a two-part meeting. The first part will be to discuss some ideas around BNSR Sustainment, and the second part will be for us to talk about COVID-19, answer any questions that any players want to raise for the group, both in terms of national responses or response that is becoming somewhat clearer with regard to the outbreak. But we're going to start with going through some information related to BNSR Sustainment. I'm going to put some slides up, so I'll share them on the screen and you'll be able to see more. I will pause at various points and ask for comments and whether or not people have anything that they want to add. And we'll go through some, and as I say, we are recording it, so we'll have an opportunity to review it after and provide more details of anything you're interested in. Any questions at this stage?
No questions, just one comment again for all the participants who are in a listening mode. So please mute your microphones to improve the audio quality. Thank you. And I'm doing just that now.
Audio quality terrible.
Correct. Если вы нажмете на mute на микрофоне, то улучшится звук. Спасибо. Thank you.
Спасибо.
So just a quick check, is that visible on people's screens at this stage?
Confirming we can see it.
Okay, great. So the first three slides, everyone who attended the annual plenary meeting in NurSultan will recognize these slides. They were presented by Pata as part of the work that he and Ekaterina and others did as the executive chair and executive committee associated with the BNSR. So the first one just lays out what BNSR is all about. And one of the words that I want to highlight here is the idea that we're in the business of trying to create sustainable capabilities, and sustainable is the key word as far as this is concerned, because that's the goal of what we want to try and achieve with BNSR, is to make it into a sustainable activity that can then undertake expanded work to support the region with respect to biosurveillance. Again, another slide that was from the presentation. When Pata presented BNSR, he indicated the following future plans. The idea of introducing new nation pairs for cross-border platform work. And we've seen the start of that with the engagement of Turkey with some of the countries. To expand the network by adding more countries. And I believe that that's a key activity that we can undertake at this stage. And engage in joint projects. One of the things that has happened in the last period since we had the APM is obviously we've seen the unfortunate outbreak of coronavirus. What coronavirus is doing at the moment is occupying all of our time and all of our energy, but it is also offering us an example of why we need to be able to work as pairs in this regional activity. It indicates that the expanded network is a strength as far as the region is concerned, and joint projects will undoubtedly come from this. So the future plans that are laid out, I believe the example that we're seeing, coronavirus, points to the need for us to try and find a way to sustain these activities to address threats like coronavirus. The other two items that were highlighted by Pata were work on the elimination of brucellosis within the region. And I think that's a very laudable project that brings in both the veterinary side of things, agricultural side of things, food side, as well as the infectious disease surveillance side. And then lastly, to cooperate and exchange scientific experiences at the regional and international levels. And one of the things I would like to try and do when we get to discuss a little bit about COVID-19 is to discuss the thing that we are already experiencing at the national level that might be useful to our colleagues within the region, and to use this vehicle as well as the APAN vehicle that a number of you have signed up to as a mechanism by which we can share best practices and experiences and try and make BNSR an effective capability. So having gone through those slides, what I'd like to do is to talk a little bit about how one view that's coming out of what we might be able to do with BNSR and show it in these slides. On the left-hand side of the slides over here, I've depict some of the partner country engagements that have been going on for a period of time, many of which the countries associated with BNSR have participated in biosurveillance projects, in biosafety and biosecurity projects, in biorisk management projects, obviously the establishment of the Luga Center, and then the S&T projects that have been funded under the TAP side of things and the CBR side of things. So what we've seen is a number of partner country engagements, and I've described them here as being transactional. And what I mean by transactional is that these have largely been programs where either DTRA has come forward and suggested that there are things that could be done if the right teams could come together and provide the capability, or teams have come together and said that they can do work and they would like DTRA to provide some funding associated with that. And what that's done is it's generated an environment over a number of years where we have created a transactional capability where projects are now able to be undertaken and being proposed by countries, but they are clear in terms of their ability to work one with another. So today is where we are. Where we want to go forward is to have a self-sustaining capability. And I am of the opinion that that would be characterized rather than transactional as being capability based. So we would use the research and development, the activities that have been done previously in each of the countries and start combining those to create capabilities within the region. And an example of that would be what we've seen recently with coronavirus, the ability of the Luga Center and also the CRL in Kazakhstan to diagnostic capability for coronavirus that might be useful and could have been taken advantage of by other countries within the region. So these are capabilities that I think we could consider as an output from the work that DTRA has done and start to define what the BNSR countries offer to one another. And what that would mean is that we move to a situation where rather than being mentees, rather than being people that are in receipt of this, we start to use the countries as mentors, that they actually learn and lead the other countries in terms of capabilities. And I think that as far as that's concerned, there is a big opportunity. And I would like to suggest that one of the things that we consider for the the annual plenary meeting this year, is to look at how some of those capabilities might have been used and might have been leveraged for the coronavirus outbreak. So I am of the opinion that we are at a stage where the investment that's been made by each of the countries in becoming part of BNSR, undertaking projects associated with BNSR, are reaching the stage which we could consider some form of graduation from this transactional arrangement to one where countries mentor others to move forward the regional capability. What that would do is use BNSR as an incubator, and what we would try and do is to encourage countries to link with other countries within the region in order that we can have a more multilateral approach rather than the individual country approach. And I have some ideas about that which I'd like to share in a minute. What mentor designation will do will allow countries to work with DTRA to advance national capabilities, and then to start to develop partnerships, cross-border events, and even perform fee-for-service work, training work, diagnostic work, best practices exchanges, that will start to facilitate self-sustainment in the areas of biosurveillance, biosafety, biosecurity, and biomanagement. And before I go any further and talk about some of those mentoring ideas, I'd just like to stop and let a few people, if they want, unmute their microphones and tell us whether or not this model is of interest or looks like it might be something that is workable within the BNSR partnerships. Anybody?
From my perspective, this is Dennis speaking. I would like just to mention one thing, that this presentation has already been extensively discussed with our colleagues in Georgia during our visit a couple of months ago. So lack of questions from the Georgia side is not a reflection of their disinterest, just that it's been once again heavily discussed already with the Georgia stakeholders. So I would defer the questions to other country members, representatives, please. If such questions arise, probably would make more sense to ask them now from Azerbaijan, Kazakhstan, if available. Thank you.
Dr. Prior, this is Ginay from DTRO-Baku. Is it possible to send that presentation to us so we can translate and share with all our partners?
Yes, it will be good.
It's a good idea.
Yes, we can share the slides with the EC and have that circulated very easily as far as that's concerned. And they are already on the site, so you can see them there.
Because currently the people who are on the call, they might not answer this question, or they might not, they might need to talk to the management about this mentorship ideas and get the feedback, and later they can say Azerbaijan contribution to this.
That's fine. That would be very.
Dennis and colleagues, dear colleagues, I have a question, not question, comment, if I may.
Please, of course.
So, as you already know, we have a very good platform established for mentorship in the framework of NCDC activities. And Dennis is well aware about that. I can also share some details if you're interested. So just very briefly, I would present that we have several directions for now selected for mentorship. These mentorship trainings are designated for regional public health and lab network specialists in the following directions, like biosafety and security general course, laboratory quality standards, especially dangerous pathogens, laboratory diagnostics, environmental health general course. So can we use this platform to expand in the framework of BNSR activities? Like, can we use our mentors for regional activities as well, in, for example, in these directions?
Thank you, Elena. I think it's a wonderful idea. I know that we've discussed it briefly previously. From my perspective, I think it would be wonderful to see Lugar Center assuming the role of a training center of excellence for the BNSR community and share the capabilities, the training capabilities of the workforce development that is currently utilized for the staff members of Lugar Center and National Center for Disease Control in general. With that being said, perhaps, Elena, if you agree, and your colleagues, it would be useful for our colleagues in Azerbaijan and Kazakhstan to see perhaps a short capture of what those capabilities are, the list of potential mentorship courses that Lugar Center can in fact offer, potential learning impacts, and the length of those courses as they are currently standing, so they can review it with their management and come back with their ideas of how those can be changed or flexed so that it would meet their training requirements, which are obviously slightly more unique than what is currently offered internally for Georgia. So this is just my short comment on your idea, which once again I think is wonderful and very much worthy of exploration. Dr. Prior, over to you if you have any comments.
I think that's exactly the type of thing that I would like to try and run a session at the annual plenary meeting where we can come together, review what Elena is talking about with the other countries, and understand how those courses might be delivered, whether it's distance learning, whether it's online, whether it's face-to-face, and get some feedback on how they might be tailored so that each country is able to gain from exactly what this slide shows, which is that the capabilities from the Lugar Center through the BNSR would act in a mentoring role to help train and support, provide direction for regional capability. It would be a great idea if people are interested. Then I think we're probably not in a position to do this in the short term with everybody's attention being taken by COVID-19, but the APM might be the right venue to bring all that together, all of us are together, and explore this in a half-day session, so people take back concrete ideas for what training might be able to do for them.
Very well. From my perspective, I think we shouldn't wait till the annual plenary and absolutely share this information with the country members. So Elena, over to you. I know this should not be a hard lift for Lugar Center to come up with a fairly short white paper describing the professional development program, or the mentorship as we call it, to our colleagues in Azerbaijan and Kazakhstan.
Thank you, Dennis. Thank you, Dr. Prior. Yes, we can share it with pleasure. So at this point, we have training materials, syllabi, mentors profiles ready. We can, of course, translate it into Russian and into English for your further discussion and review. And we can also draft and share the white paper of the whole concept, what we see in mentorship in general on national level, and what we can suggest and offer on regional level as well.
I think that would be wonderful.
Completely agree. I think it's a wonderful first step. Over to our colleagues in Azerbaijan. Is this acceptable to you? Do you have any further ideas or any more information that you potentially may need in considering this as a valid effort. Коллеги из Азербайджана, если у вас есть какие-то вопросы или какие-то комментарии относительно того, что сейчас обсудили мы про программу дополнительной подготовки персонала, возможно, у вас какие-то есть вопросы, предложения или какие-то темы, которые вы хотели бы еще затронуть, которые не были упомянуты еще. Пожалуйста, сейчас время вам ответить на, или, по крайней мере, поднять эти вопросы для ответа. Спасибо.
Спасибо, Денис, с переводом помогли тоже. И я хотела бы также получить, может быть, переведенный материал, чтобы обсудить его также с коллегами и руководством. Но на сегодня, на данный момент у меня нет таких тем, которые можно было бы добавить. Пока такой мысли нет, таких идей не имею. И все-таки нужно будет обсудить это с коллегами, потому что это не для меня одной, и это приоритет для страны. Поэтому я хотела бы получить материал, чтобы его обсудить.
Understood. Just a quick translation of what Nazifa just told us. She's saying she's thankful for the material. She will be waiting anxiously to receive a copy, and probably that receipt of this information will spur discussion internally, as it will be happening not singularly for her, or the discussion will obviously be with her senior leadership. So as soon as we get this information out to her, she will be coming up with questions further on. Thank you, Nazifa.
Thank you, Denise.
Dennis, this is Günay Zayeva from Azerbaijan, project manager for the additional sustainability support as part of the biological threat reduction program. I have one suggestion that will probably need additional discussion and further research between the Lugar Center and the Biosafety Association of Azerbaijan. But I believe this could be really a good opportunity for the Biosafety Association of Azerbaijan to consider doing, or at least familiarizing with the mentorship trainings on the biosafety and biosecurity that Elena just described us. Probably most of you know Dr. Shayer Gurbanov, so he is the chief of the Azerbaijan Biosafety Association, and he has got some ideas of receiving some biosafety BSNS refresher trainings and then maybe developing it to the advanced level trainings. So if okay with you, I will put in touch Dr. Gurbanov with Elena so they could discuss the idea in detail, and I'll be happy to also help to further develop the idea.
That is wonderful, wonderful news. Absolutely. I would just encourage you to keep this conversation going with a larger audience, and do please include Dr. Prior and myself in this discussion as well, so we can help the way we can. But fantastic. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, well then let's move forward to the next few slides where I've tried to look a little bit at what the entire scope of those types of mentoring and mentee relationships would be concerned. So the next slide provides us with a view of that. Oops, there we go. A view of that, taken the mentoring needs and broken it down. The objective here would be that we engender consistent and effective regional networking, and also increase scientific transparency. One of the things that I think was a real advantage of the APM was the degree to which scientific information was shared amongst colleagues and with peer groups to enable each group to learn from the other groups and the experiences and knowledge and the challenges that have been overcome. So I divided the mentoring into two. The upper blue box describes the types of engagements that, some of which we've already just been discussing, that I think we could look forward to as far as a program that the BNSR could be involved with. That would include information exchange, face-to-face meetings, cross-border relations, but also the use of some of these virtual tools that we're piloting associated with BNSR and also with the coronavirus. So the ability to host meetings between members and group members in a virtual environment. The bringing together of expert group associated with these online tools, and also distance learning. I think one of the keys to how we might be able to really promote the growth of education and training and continued professional development within the region is to take advantage of distance learning tools. We've had some experience of this in other parts of the world with DTRA. It's been successful in some places and less successful in others, but we've learned a lot. These type tools where students can learn at their own pace, in their own time, alongside the more formal training, has proven to be very effective. And with the tools available, you can do the follow-up with the students, the tests with the students. You can actually make significant courses associated with this. And obviously those would focus in on biosafety, biosecurity, bio risk management, but in the public health domain and then also in the veterinary domain. I think there is an opportunity for us to begin that information exchange, and instead of having it just once a year, be in a position to have it on an ongoing basis and a case basis when it merits it, like it appears to do with COVID-19. The second idea is that we would be able to share theory and practices of trainees training and train the trainer, which is what Elena was talking about with the mentorship program, which we just had the idea of as far as the Biosafety Association is concerned. I think all of those would be great, and part of it will be creating an environment in which people are made aware of what other countries have already done and what they can bring to the table to help everybody. And we could also look at the possibility of accreditation or certification associated with that. And we have had some success with using these mechanisms to create accreditation and certification for professionals in the area of biosafety and other tools that we want to do. And then lastly, the idea of doing some more data exchange, looking at best practices and lessons learned. I think we're all going to learn lessons with coronavirus. We're all going to have some best practices that come out of that could be shared. All of those would be useful at a regional level, I'm sure, as each country would not then have to reinvent all of the parts, and we can benefit from where countries have been successful in establishing new capabilities that help with a disease like coronavirus. And then lastly, at the bottom, I put the idea that we might consider, as far as mentoring is concerned, the shared experience and partnerships using publications. We all know how difficult it is to get publications into the peer review realm. It's expensive, it's time consuming, and it can be very frustrating not being able to get more information out there. Perhaps we can look at some mechanisms by which we might be able to do that regionally, and using perhaps the APAN community to share documents that are peer-reviewed in the sense that they're not simply people's ideas put out without thought, but which haven't had to go through the type of peer review for publication in Nature or New Scientist or procedures in national academies or things like that. And then lastly, we could also look at the possibility of sharing the experience that some countries have with developing national standards, regulations related to biosafety, biosafety cabinet certification, things that are important in terms of establishing a regional capability and a regional certification of the quality of what's being done in the various countries. So there are a lot of opportunities for us, and part of it is finding a venue for us to be able to explore that and explain that and share that on an ongoing basis, and we're going to try and do that, starting with APAN, but also looking at the use of the tool like we're using today, the Zoom video conferencing, and other tools that appear to be relatively simple for us to put in place, and for which we can get a lot of sharing going on between the groups. So the roadmap as far as the sustainable BNSR is concerned is summarized in this slide. What we're looking to try and do is promote activities that could, would, or should facilitate pan-BNSR initiatives, so involving all of the countries in these initiatives, and finding ways where countries can get together and learn and gain from each other's experience as on a case-by-case or technical capability basis. We want to try and promote bilateral and multilateral engagements, and we also want to develop the ability we all see as being key as far as this is concerned in biosurveillance, biosafety, security, and biorisk management. What that will do, we believe, is start to promote national self-sustainment. That in doing this, in learning from each other, in taking advantage of what other people have already invested money in, we may be able to start to see some cost inefficiencies in routine activities. And also developing national capabilities that can attract external funding. So we're looking at things like the field surveillance associated with especially dangerous pathogens, or specific studies that need to be done where countries have experience that can lead to cost saving and efficiencies. So create money from within existing budgets rather than having to go out and find new money as far as this is concerned, but also finding new sources of money so that it's not merely DTRA. We can look at it as some of the external funding and use the BNSR venue of NGO, a non-governmental organization, and perhaps other organizations that we can set up under the BNSR banner to attract funding from external sources. Foundations will fund, but often they want to see another foundation that they can fit into. So we can look at all of these things. So we have some ideas about how that roadmap might fit, and then we have a view, I speak through, of what that might look like in terms of the totality of the activities. So we've been talking right at the bottom here earlier in this discussion about the idea of training and mentorship associated with lab detection of EDPs, associated with biosafety and security, and creating effectively some regional centers of excellence. One area that we didn't discuss, but I think is quite important, is the establishment of quality management systems, and where countries and facilities have got experience in establishing those things, often leading to accreditation. We'd like to be able to share those within the BNSR so that we don't have to have every country replicate the learning curve, that each country can benefit from other groups that have already been down this path, tested some of the tools, and can give us an idea of whether those tools are effective or not. The second area in this little three-way pie chart is to leverage a significant effort that has been made by countries in GIS mapping. We've seen a lot of work published from the country in terms of threat mapping. We've seen some good work associated with biorisk management, and I'd like to see what opportunities we might be able to do in terms of forecasting so that we can look at regional collaboration, preparedness and response, and begin to build a regional capability to understand what disease threats are doing in the region, which external threats are coming into the region, and how those threats are moving through the region. And an example there would be something like African swine fever. where we know that it's already entered to a number of countries and transiting, and we can start to think about how we might forecast where it's going next and start doing some preparedness and response for those types of threats. And then lastly, an area again that has been funded, which I think we could start to leverage the knowledge and capabilities that countries have generated in terms of pathogen surveys, both for routine surveillance, so dealing with biosurveillance for routine characterization of diseases in country and in the region, for being able to look at outbreaks and incidents, and sharing data associated with outbreaks and incidents to help establish a capability across the region. And then lastly, an area that this region is particularly strong in through the old anti-plague system of field surveys. So knowing where the reservoirs are for these diseases, knowing the animal components for the zoonotic diseases, in order that we can begin to look at that. So I see that there are a large number of capabilities that we know that exist within individual countries and within multiple countries within the region. The goal would be to look at how we might use that to extend the capabilities within the region and attract external funding to make some of these things a reality for BNSR. And given the time that we've gone 45 minutes so far, I think I'm going to stop with that slide and again turn it over and ask if people have got examples that they would like to talk about as far as that's concerned, and any discussion of the idea of this is a way forward for BNSR that leverages what you already have, what you've already done, and what you've already proven as capabilities. I think there is a lot that we can use rather than thinking about what we have to do to attract external funding with new ideas. Any comments from anyone in any of the countries?
Dr. Pratt.
Hello. Hello, this is Sakin Algiyev, ISTC from Kazakhstan. My question would be, what are the, how do you see the training mentorship would be held? Would it be done in centers of excellence, regional, like center of excellence like we have in Uzbekistan, or there will be new centers created for that reason, for that purpose? How do you see that to be implemented? Basically, I'm interested in the training mentorship side.
Well, I think that's for the group to together and decide what would be most effective. I think it's feasible at this stage to look at a number of models, whether they are physical centers of excellence or virtual centers of excellence. What we know is that the excellence is there. The question is how to tie it together and make it useful as far as the countries are concerned. And part of that is making people aware of what's out there. So being more overt in terms of communicating what has been done in a country and what's available and what could be shared with other countries, and looking at how that need to be tailored to meet the specifics. But I think we all know that there are a lot of things in this region which we could use like that, but we haven't so far been in a position to be able to do that, in part because we haven't shared that knowledge and information to create centers of excellence. But I think we can, and I think there are opportunities to have some of those funded.
Thank you very much for explanation.
Dr. Prior, this is Pata. On a few occasions, you mentioned a biorisk management program. Did you refer specifically to any existing program, or are you talking in general development towards biorisk management?
I think that there are opportunities for both of those, Pata. I believe that the need for biorisk management is apparent when we start looking at any of these diseases that fit into the especially dangerous pathogens. There is no one tool that's going to give us what we need. And biorisk management is much an approach to dealing with these things as it is the actual tools that create that. But we have the opportunity to start to try and reduce the risk, particularly during outbreaks, and to take advantage of the skills and knowledge that some of the countries have with specific pathogens that are applicable to the emergent pathogens, the novel pathogens, and the tough pathogens that are out there. So I believe that there are opportunities. I think it begins with mapping the threat, understanding how those threats are manifest, and then looking at how you would manage the risk associated with that using the tools that we have. And we all know that none of us are going to have all the tools that we want. This is a resource-constrained environment. We have to create our own resources. We have to better utilize the resources that we have. And biorisk management is in part looking at what are those threats, how are they manifest, and what tools do we have that could be applied, which will give us the best, using the US term, bang for the buck. How do we get the most out of what we have?
Thank you.
Dr. Prior, I have a question to you. So thank you for the slide. This is quite informative, but to be more clear, you are mentioning the regional collaboration through these 3 pillars. I mean, this collaboration is will be built on mutual collaboration, data sharing, expertise sharing, or will you engage international experts for building up more capacity in the region?
I would like to use, if possible, as much as we can from what's in the region, because I think that helps the region to grow and become more confident and more able in what it has. But where it makes sense to bring in international experts who have specific skills, whether they're in the ECDC environment from the European CDC, whether they're from the US CDC, or whether they are from academia, I think it's important that we bring in those types of people to help us. What I would try and steer away from is the type of transactional approach that has been seen in some places, where the folks that are engaged are very keen to come in and get their publications, but they don't create a sustainable capability that exists after they've gone. So in part, I think it's incumbent on us to find people who we're going to have within our countries and within our systems, and they're going to be retained, rather than training people and then having them move on and lose that capability when they move on. So I think it's systematizing and creating the mechanisms by which these things can be sustained beyond just individuals, whether they're international experts or local experts, in order that we can keep this thing running and not have to go back and reinvent it every 3 years because we've got a new cohort of individuals.
Thank you. Thank you. And one more question regarding it. So for the purpose of sustainability, I understand so that each country should have a kind of business plan describing all kind of activities plus budget, of course. And how do you think we will be able to create our own business plans, or will they be reviewed or amended by SMEs, international SMEs as well? So what is your view regarding it?
I think that the external SME type input is very helpful in creating a framework, but I believe that the process of planning is every bit as important as the final plan. it brings people together, it engages them, they buy into the solutions. So I think the key will be that any plans that are generated that are for sustainment are built by the people in the countries and in the country pairs, so that we know that it can be sustained on the basis of how they operate. So if we're in a position where we have career scientists, it would be good to start them out and build them into the planning process so that they see their career advancement fitting with the advancement of the development of these skills. There's nothing more frustrating than spending a lot of time engaging on learning something and then finding that you can't apply it because there isn't any money. But I also believe that by sharing between countries, and you've given us a great example with what has been done at NCDC in terms of the mentorship and training program, that by not having to reinvent that at every point and for each country, then there can be savings from existing budgets and inefficiencies and in existing monies. And we all know that the biggest challenge in all of this is finding the funding to keep people and to bring new people in. People are the expensive part of this, and in order to do it, I think we have to create efficiencies, and those efficiencies come from not having to have every country do everything every single time. Countries can learn from one another and gain from one another's experiences and knowledge.
Okay, thank you. So, so I mean that yes, the international expertise engagement will be very critical, and as for having the already just completed business plans, of course, so we can apply for different donors for raising some funds, and I hope that DTRO will be very helpful in this case to search for these kind of donors, and we hope for better expansion, a better development of this part. Thank you, Dr. Prior.
You're welcome, but I think you do highlight something that's very important, which is the donors that are out there, the foundations, the people that are capable of providing money, look for a certain type of presentation of the problem, of what the solution is, what the funding is going to be spent on, and why it should be spent. And again, they're looking for sustainability. They're not looking to fund things that just happen and then disappear. They're looking to fund things that will be sustainable. And I think we have to be able to put together business plans as well as project plans that highlight that. And I think BNSR, the fact that BNSR came into being because of the countries in the region, and it was their own invention and their own, they have the ownership of it, I think is critically important, because I think that shows that there is intent on the part of the countries, rather than someone saying, well, we should just bring these countries together and give it a name, and the Silk Road sounds like a good name. I think the strength of this organization is the people and the relationships that have been built. And what I want to do is to try and find a way to help to systematize that and make that more formal, so that we go out and seek additional funding to make this a funded and sustainable capability.
Yeah, sure. So the regional efforts and activities will be much more attractive for donors, of course. So we should be strive for being strengthened and more sustainable, for being more attractive in future. Yeah, thank you.
I think that's a key. I really do. I think that in looking at the way that funding has been put together in other parts of the world, the idea of a Middle East, North Africa component, or a West Africa component, or any of the examples that are out there, North Africa, you can look at any of these examples, but where countries have come together in their own right, and then made a justification for why they've come together to the donors, they've been more successful than individual countries requesting funding. Okay, I'm going to stop there. We've gone an hour, which is what we said we would do. So I'm going to stop this at this point as far as the BNSR is concerned. We will share this obviously as a recorded session. With our colleagues that weren't on this call. We'll share all the slides, we'll put those out through the EC, and we'll put some comments on the slides so that they're not just these pictures that I've put together. There is some words that go along with it so that which we can translate and have available. And then what I'd like to do is to find an opportunity to gather that information back and then have another session where we can look at, well, what was highlighted, what were people excited about, what were people not interested in, and then we can start to begin looking at a development of a plan for BNSR and sustainment, which we have the buy-in from the participants.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so I'm going to stop sharing this, and we said for the second part that we would talk a little bit about this burning issue of the day, the coronavirus. And again, thank you all for all the efforts that you're putting in to try and deal with this disease. I'm going to start off by making one comment which I think might be helpful based upon some research published just a couple of days ago, which I put into the APAN side of things. It was a study by some Chinese physicians who looked at a very small cohort of only 9 patients who had been exposed to the SARS-CoV-2 virus causing COVID-19. And the findings that they came out with, I think, are important and are instructive for anybody that's trying to deal with this disease right now. And the findings were as follows. The first was that the peak shedding of virus, so post-exposure, the multiplication of the virus and then the shedding of the virus by an individual in an infective stage occurred in just 4 days after exposure. So unlike a number of other coronaviruses and other RNA viruses, where you expect to see that peak in the 7 to 10 days or even 7 to 14 days, and to be at the same time as individuals are showing symptoms, so they are experiencing upper respiratory tract infections and they are shedding the virus in secretions from the upper respiratory tract. That's not the case with SARS-CoV-2 and the COVID disease. They are asymptomatic, they're not showing any outward signs of having been infected, but they are shedding large amounts of virus. And in studies, the same study that was done, they compared the amount of virus that was shed at a peak of day 4 versus 7 to 10 days SARS with the virus shedding in SARS, and found that the COVID-19, the amount of virus that's being shed is between 1,000 and 10,000 times as much as for SARS. So we're not only seeing a virus that's being spread very early in the infection, it's being spread at very high level, and it's being spread with no apparent symptoms. And that asymptomatic transmission in the early stages post-exposure makes this a particularly difficult thing to deal with, and requires that the use of assay and detection capability using RT-PCR has to be spread to not just symptomatic patients, but also presumptive exposees, in order that you can begin to identify what's going on with this disease early in populations and then exert some control. So this is a very different disease, and begins to explain why we've seen some of the patterns that we're seeing, where there doesn't appear to be a particular patient zero that's providing the disease spread. It's actually a number of patient zeros who aren't patients because they haven't shown any symptoms, but they are spreading large amounts of virus very early on. Does anybody have any comments about that?
Thank you, Dr. Prior. Not a comment, more of a clarifying question. I think it's very, very interesting information. definitely something that would explain why we're seeing such an explosive caseload in Italy, and obviously we're expecting more to happen in European countries. You mentioned the day 4 high viral shedding, which is asymptomatic, obviously, but did the study look at the pattern of symptom development and perhaps the timeline when such symptoms on average are showing in patients?
Yes, and again, it was only 9 patients, so it's not a very large cohort. But in terms of the incubation, they on average, you were looking at incubation prior to developing clinical symptoms of about 5 days, but the range was between 2 and 14 days as far as that was concerned. And then between symptomology in the later stages of the disease and death, about 14 days, but the range there was even wider. It ranged from 6 days in patients that were significantly comorbid at the point at which they were infected with COVID-19 to 41 days. So they actually have patients that they were studying who had clinical disease going out to 41 days. That's a long way beyond where the general approach has been, which has been out to 28 days. And what they also saw was this a 3-phase disease state. So an early phase with no symptoms but significant viral shedding and therefore an ability to expose other people to the virus. Then an initial phase that's driven by an upper respiratory tract infection, which is relatively mild, from which a number of people recover, particularly the younger population recover from that, before a short period of recovery, and then a very acute secondary phase, which is based upon a lower respiratory tract disease, which is the one that's causing the death, particularly in aged or comorbid patients. So patients over the age of 60, that's me, but people over the age of 60, particularly there is a case fatality rate linkage to age, such that from the age of 60 onwards, the CFR goes up from measured 1 to just over 1%, which I think is a high estimate, but anyway, over 1%. If you're over 60, that climbs to about 5%. If you're over 70, it climbs to over 8%. If you're over 80, it climbs to 15%. So a clear elevation as far as that's concerned. And then also a clear linkage between outcome and comorbidities of emphysema, asthma, COPD, and also diabetes, which is interesting. So the first 3 are fairly obvious in terms of the inability to handle a virus load in the upper respiratory tract that then is capable of establishing in the lower respiratory tract and causing pneumonias. The diabetes appears to be associated with, that's the major route for the removal of the virus. And if you have a diabetic condition, it appears to be that you can't clear the virus as much, and therefore the viral load remains fairly high in those patients. Does that fit with the experience? I know we've got too many cases at the moment, but is that the what people are looking for? Is that what people are thinking about as far as patients are concerned, that you have to be careful that you see recovery before rapid comes in patients that are not going to see a particularly successful outcome?
It's Peter Motovkin, Ukraine. Yesterday, Minister of Health announced that there were 2 additional cases registered for COVID-19, and actually one of them supports the idea that was written in the article that you have presented just now. A man in Ukraine was confirmed for the disease, but actually the cause was his wife, which came from Italy, and she showed no symptoms at all. And now she's just studied, but only her husband was infected. So we have now 3 cases, and with one just another lady, which was 70 years, who came from Poland recently, and she made a mistake and went to a church last Sunday, and now 28 people contacting with her, like, under control here. But once again, I agree that probably asymptomatic spread of the disease would be the most dangerous part of this epidemic.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I think it underlines the primary importance of being able to do contact tracing and quickly establish links, particularly close contact links between an individual that goes on to develop symptoms and the people that they've come into contact with in the previous 7 days for any extended period of time. That will give you the best possible chance of trying to mitigate the large numbers of patients. Which brings me on to the other point that's I think becoming apparent, and that the differences in numbers of cases that we're seeing in various countries. We obviously all explain, we all know about China and then South Korea and Iran and Italy. But the countries that are coming up behind those, particularly the examples of France, Germany, Spain, as far as Europe is concerned, it's a time-phased issue. They are tracking almost exactly the experience that we saw in Italy. They're just a couple of weeks behind, and a couple of weeks or 2 weeks at this stage makes a big difference, because it's also clear that within the population, identifying cases of individuals that have become symptomatic, the doubling is between 25 and 30% a day in countries where this becomes active. So you see, 25 to 30% per day. So you're seeing a doubling of case numbers in 3 to 4 days. And the countries are following that pattern fairly well. Italy, because it went into it here, is fortunately the poster child for this, with a large number of cases. They had over 1,000 cases in a day yesterday, but that's because they have a large number of baseline cases that are causing this. But the other countries are going to catch them up fairly quickly. And unfortunately, the number will not be, it's going to be difficult to see those numbers not climb higher for a long period of time. And it will take a lot of public health interaction of the type that China engaged in to mitigate and control this disease. And of course, what you don't do is you don't change herd immunity doing that. You do slow things down, but ultimately you will still see those things go on for a fairly extended period of time. So I think we're still in the early stages of this. We're probably still learning the lessons of this, but I think sharing those lessons, particularly with countries that at the moment have less than 50 cases, might be useful in terms of delaying the impact that they're going to see with those case numbers starting to climb.
So Dr. Prior, thank you for information. So what's your recommendation to the countries, how you say, like the cases less than 50? Do we need to increase quarantine measures? I mean, what do we need to do not to follow Italy's face, or you are still thinking that it's just time pace, everybody will be there?
I think advising nations is above my pay grade. But in terms of epidemiology and looking at what needs to be done, the small numbers of cases that countries first have are often driven by repatriation of people coming from countries and areas where there is a large number of cases ongoing. So Italy, if you look at the map, and I can share the maps, I'm happy to share the maps with you. If you look at the network of countries that have become infected because of individuals that have come out of Italy, it's substantial and wide-ranging. So the first thing is countries should be alert to the fact that people that are coming back from countries where there is a lot of active virus at this stage should be given guidance and given some information to be able to help them to limit the possibility that they will then cause disease within other people in the country. I think that having a robust biosurveillance and contact tracing capability is important. I've just done twice on Turkish Airlines in the last 12 hours. They provided public health documents to everyone on the plane. You were asked to fill them out with information about flight, your seat number, and other information that would contact tracing take place. So the alert that people would get off the plane showing those symptoms, and what they were keen to do in Turkey was identify very quickly if someone had an outbreak, that they would be able to identify who was close to the plane if they're still in Turkey. So those types of things I'll go out on a limb here. I don't think that doing the type of major restriction of movement that the United States has just done for the countries from Europe is going to be effective in stopping the disease in the United States. And I'm not sure it's going to be effective at this stage. I think contain we're through the contain stage. We're in the delay stage now, and we're moving towards the idea of needing to mitigate this in each of the countries.
Thank you very much.
I didn't really give you answers, but what I would say, those of you that are in the middle of this and dealing with it, it's important to start planning for the recovery phase as well. China's in the first of their recovery phases, and they're starting to lift some of the restrictions. An important part in that recovery phase is to have a plan for lifting those restrictions. So not only lifting them, but actually deciding how you monitor what's happened, because what you can't afford to do is to lift the restrictions and then find 2 weeks later that you've got an explosion of new cases resulting from this, and then you impose it again, but it takes 2 weeks for it to take effect. So it's important to have a very robust, very high quality monitoring system when you do start to move towards lifting of the restrictions of public health, social distancing, movement restrictions, travel restrictions, so that you can become alert to any changes that are occurring that might show you 2 weeks from now having an explosion of cases and doubling every 3 to 4 days.
Dr. Prior, I have a question. So what do you think about disinfection works? For example, in Georgia and in big cities, these works are done regularly. Do you think that this will work?
I'm sorry, you broke up. Can you just repeat that, Elaine?
Do you hear me well or no? Should I repeat?
Yeah, if you would repeat it, that would be helpful.
Yes, I'm asking about the disinfection works, you know, so a lot of services, city hall services are conducting disinfections in closed areas, in closed spaces. And, you know, there are a lot of assumptions and opinions about that, but I just need your opinion about that. So do these kind of works really work and are they really useful in this case? I mean, in the prevention measures against COVID-19.
I think it's very difficult to make a judgment on that. We know that the Chinese authorities included a very robust disinfection program and program of cleaning up, including cleaning out of the sewer systems in case there was the possibility of virus residing in those environments. This is a fairly persistent virus. It will for fairly long periods of time on surfaces. If we truly are seeing 1,000 times more virus being shed in the early stages, and that shed is not associated with symptoms, so it's not because someone has got respiratory secretion and they're coughing and sneezing, and therefore you can see that this virus is being spread. Under the circumstances where the virus is clearly being shed, but you're not seeing a symptom associated with it, I think you have to assume that things like disinfection and wiping of surfaces will reduce the viral and reduce the possibility of transfer to new patients. So I witnessed that a lot on the last 2 days travel. Masks being less apparent than early travel that I'd seen. Less people using masks. They were using a lot more wipes of surfaces, cell phones. I'm not sure how important that is, but wiping surfaces before they touched them, wiping down parts of the aircraft that they knew that other people will have touched, volume controls, video controls, wiping those surfaces down to ensure that the virus that may have persisted wasn't something that they were going to transfer to themselves. So I think it's too early to tell, but I don't think it can hurt at this stage.
Yes, thank you, thank you. I think so too. Thank you.
Dr. Prior, is there any general consensus as to what that infective viral load may be?
Not that I'm aware of. The receptors are the same receptors as for SARS. So I would assume that it's a very similar viral load that would cause the problem. It seems to be that the difference is the amount of virus that's being shed by individuals that have been exposed rather than a low dose, high virulence pathogen. But we don't have a good animal model. I haven't seen good data yet on how virulent the strains are. There was, of course, the paper that came out that suggested there may have been mutations that meant that you had two forms, the S and L form as they were called, one of which was more virulent than others, but that's subsequently been shown that that was an observation that was made at a time the public health measures were being applied, and it wasn't really a change in the virus. It was that the monitoring was being done under circumstances where there was a lot more public health control, and therefore it wasn't less virulent. It was that you saw less cases because of the public health measures. Okay, well, we're into another hour. I could talk forever, but that's not what everybody wants. So if there aren't more questions, I'll turn it over to Dennis to conclude this, and we'll put all this together and make it available to everybody. Thank you for all your time.
Thank you, Dr. Prior. Absolutely wonderful to hear and see at this point. So all you colleagues, thank you very much for your time. This is an opportunity once again to ask follow up questions and share your ideas once again with the panel. Before we conclude, from my perspective, if I may add, I think now that we found the Zoom and its capabilities, perhaps it's a good idea for us to establish frequency upon which we will be meeting with each other via this platform. If I may suggest, perhaps a monthly telecon to start or videocon to start would be a good idea. What do you think, colleagues? How often and whether or not you'd want to continue with this? Thank you.
Dennis, brilliant idea. We NCDC are always ready to be connected through this kind of teleconferences. So once a month is a very good idea.
Excellent. Thank you. Azerbaijan colleagues, are you okay with that as well?
Мы тоже присоединяемся к этой мысли. Идея хорошая, конечно, подключаться на телеконференции и обсудить самые горячие вопросы, как в области здравоохранения, ветеринарии, сельского хозяйства, пищевой промышленности и так далее. То есть все наши вот эти общие проблемы можно обсудить с минимальной затратой времени, и это, я думаю, даст свои результаты. Это правильный вывод.
Спасибо, Nazifa. So Nazifa is saying that absolutely they are agreeing with the frequency as well as the fact she's highlighting that perhaps this is the most efficient time-wise platform through which we can quickly address all the ongoing issues on items of the human health, veterinary and food safety and other burning issues such as COVID. She's probably skewing it a little bit toward the human health for now, but nonetheless we are a One Health approach organization and will continue to be so. In doing that, we, or our Azerbaijan colleagues are agreeing to conduct this meeting monthly. So thank you, Nazifa, for that. With this, I will encourage you to continue to very actively monitor our APAN platform, which is quickly becoming a way for us to disseminate the most up-to-date information. A lot of peer-reviewed articles Dr. Prior is putting on APAN as well. From our perspective at DTRA, we felt it is important to translate some, if not all, of this material. So what we will start doing this week into the next and further on, we will be translating select articles on APAN and linking them to the original English version. For those of you colleagues who perhaps would rather acquaint yourself with this topic in Russian. So this will be happening in the days to come. So once again, I encourage you to maintain your awareness of APAN, and we will be sharing the Zoom invite with you for the follow-on discussion on this and many other matters related to the BNSR. From my perspective, thank you very much for all your attention. Thank you, Dr. Prior, for your splendid work and the fact that despite the travel interruptions, you were able to join us and conduct this call. So thank you for that. With this, I'd like to conclude the formal portion, the recorded portion of this event. And unless of course there are last-minute questions, comments for us. Anyone?
Dennis, as we already agreed, I can submit to DTRA first the white paper of the concept of regional mentorship, what we can offer to our colleagues of the BNSR countries. Or do you think that we can share it directly at the same time to the countries as well? I don't know. What will be your suggestion? But in a couple of weeks, we will be ready to submit the syllabi profiles and concept paper, white paper about regional mentorship. At the same time, we also discussed a kind of business plans based on each country's capacity and if someone will be able to help us in drafting this kind of business plan, of course, based on our capacities, activities, and services, what we can offer, and just expand for sustainability, that will be really appreciative from our end.
Absolutely, Elena, thank you for that. I propose, once the document is ready, to share it internally with the with our group and the secretariat with the BNSR to begin with, for internal discussion and perhaps a little more editing before we post it on APAN and translate it into Russian, so we can share it with the larger BNSR community. That plan is acceptable to you. Let's follow that.
Okay, will do. Okay.
Very well. So I'm tracking this. 2-week time sounds very reasonable. Thank you. So we'll be waiting for this packet of documents from NCDC Lugar Center in the next 2 weeks' time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone else. I'm going to stop the recording, and you may remain online if you wish to continue your informal conversations.